Welcome to Punchline Africa Television, broadcasting from the Political Command Center in London. Good morning. Viewers across the continent of Africa, this is an opportune time for us to listen to what goes on in Africa. This is an opportune time for you to evaluate where we stand, how we go, where we go, when can we go, what is left for us in African Union. And you cannot do better than to have this man, Dr. David Manzi Nyekura Chimatanga, son of soil, who can interpret what is going on in African Union. Is the African Union the one that we wanted? Is it the one that the citizens of Africa want? This program today, short, precise, together with Miriam Ogutu from Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning, Miriam.
Good morning to you, and good morning to our viewers. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where they're tuned in and watching us today.
Thank you very much. As we go to the press yesterday, Donald Trump was arraigned in New York court on criminal charges. What does it say? What does it mean for the democracy of Africa? What does it give you? What impression does it give you in Africa that a man in a first world democracy is taken on fraudulent papers? Is it a genuine application of political witch hunt? Which Miriam will look at that in the diaspora dispatches later in the afternoon. But for us, let's fix our minds on African Union. Miriam, give us your background on the African Union. What have we done? Where are we? Then I can come in, then give my insight and give one takeaway. Then we go home. As precise, as short as that. That's what we intend to do. Thank you. Back to you in Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, thank you. Just a very brief introduction to the African Union. Formerly known as the Organization of the African Unity, from 1963 to 2002, when it was changed to African Union, and it was established to promote unity and solidarity of African states, to spur economic development and to promote international cooperation. The African Union replaced the Organization of African Unity, OAU, and the AU's headquarters are found in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The Organization for African Union was about uniting Africa against colonialism, but the African Union is about integration. It is not just a name change, but rather the desire to take the continent to a very different level. The name states its purpose and how it is established. The AU has had some reasonable successes, though its direct contribution and collaboration with the international community to settling and minimizing conflicts in some of the region's hotbeds, such as troubled spots in Sudan, resolving post-election violent conflicts in Cote d'Ivoire and Kenya, and forcing military coup makers to hand back power to civilian regimes in Somalia. The AU's deployed more than 2,000 troops from various countries and a couple of others, but I think it is the AU's many failures that seems to stand out. To start with, the AU is struggling to resolve the multiplicities facing the continent and to assume its responsibilities. Its weaknesses was made all too evident when the European Union and others prepared Resolution 1973 and its implementation for the Libyan crisis in 2012 that saw the fall of Gaddafi regime, but the AU was not consulted. So that is just one of the key among other failures, and indeed some of the successes we shall be discussing throughout this conversation this morning. So it's just a bit of background there.
Thank you very much, Miriam. As you put it, those are some of the successes, failures. What is the major failure here of the African Union? The major failure of the African Union is to unite, is to put the union into one unit that talks with one voice. It was said to unite Africans. But where else can we go to? Where can we go as Africans? Which angle can we go? What can we do, surely, as Africans, to make sure that we speak with one voice? There are a number of issues on the African continent, Miriam, where we have not spoken with one voice. The question of Libya, for example, we didn't speak with one voice. We ended up with African countries endorsing Resolution 1990. 1970, that came to dismember the Libyan territory, and killed Gaddafi, dismembered the whole nation of Libya. Ladies and gentlemen, what then is Africa going to do to change the difficulties that we have? The African Union is a shell of different opinions. We still borrow money, we rely on handouts from the European Union. 65 years or 63 years after the formation of African Union, we can't have our own money with our own resources and banks that can also lend on African countries. What can we do to change the African Union? What African Union do you want? I think the values of changing the African Union are very many. One of them is to create a bank in each country. That African Union has a bank in Kenya, in Uganda, in Zambia, in Tanzania. Let the natives of Africa bank there and get loans to develop their little SMEs, to develop the micro enterprises that they have across Africa, and then bank back the money. By the end of years, 5 years or 10 years, Africa will have enough money to hold its elections without seeking help from the European Union. If we have not done that, these are issues. Africa, education. The education policy on the African continent has collapsed. We produce only job white-collar seekers. We don't produce people who make jobs. African Union has departments of agriculture. How many people in Africa have received an AU agriculture officer coming to his country to hold a seminar on how to sensitize Africans on how to produce and manage food? Very few. When hunger strikes, you rarely see African Union. You only see European Union donating us, telling us we shall give you boreholes. But how many of African Union boreholes have they sunk? And the Miriam, we have created a whole secretariat, a whole commission of African Union, of agriculture. But do you have one borehole of African Union? Show me. Maybe it is in your country, Kenya. Do you have one? I don't think. I've not seen a borehole. I've not seen a veterinary man under the ministry, but we have a whole commission for agriculture. And the ladies, they are chosen. They take up political positions. Commission for Agriculture. What does that Commission for Agriculture and African Union help Africans? Does it help us to grow more crops? Does it help us to diversify crops? Does it help us? Does it get us markets? We have Africa Peace and Security. Show me where successfully they have resolved the conflict. In Somalia, the conflict is still on. It's worse every time we change from UNIMIS, ATMIS. What else? AMIS, we can change from Dugudu. All those words will come. But how far have we gone to resolve one big problem? Where is it? Show me one place. Sudan, South Sudan. The agreement is tinkering to death on a tinker hook of death because it doesn't have money to implement the agreement. The only enmity is returning. Remember, one of the cardinal principles of conflict resolution in the world is you can't resolve conflict with a friend. You resolve conflict with an enemy. Because if Miriam is my friend, why should I resolve a conflict with her? What conflict do we have with Miriam? That's why the cardinal principle of conflict is you resolve a conflict one of the biggest conflicts of Africa is corruption. Jesus this week entered the temple of Jerusalem. Miriam and wiped out corruption. He beat up people. That is God beating people. That is God showing you that anybody doing corruption, evil, don't take lightly. Don't give him a chance. Whip him out of your temple. The temple of Africa has a problem. It has corruption. It has corruption. Africa cannot move. African Union itself is the center of corruption. Even sex corruption that takes place inside African Union. Sex for jobs. Women have to pay to get jobs in African Union. So when can we have African Union that functions? I submit, therefore, there is a problem, Miriam. And how do we change? You can't have moribund organizations, institutions, departments of politics and security. What does it do? Does it hold seminars to sensitize people from crime? Have you seen one seminar of African Union's peace and security? They only go for a meeting. You see heads of state tying with ties, flying, using our money again to fly to go and discuss nothing. The conflict in Congo here, East African troops have gone themselves. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Somalia, they have decided to go to Congo. And because there is no guidance from African Union, multiple operators have now arrived in DRC, in Rwanda. They are convincing these countries separately. Have you seen the mess we have? If it is not coordinated by AU, it is going to go to flames. We have external bad enemies like Qatar that are watching over. They want to buy. They are not making peace. They are buying peace. And African Union, this one here, this one whose symbol I hold in my face, it was given to me on 2nd to 4th of April 2017 in Khartoum, Sudan. Here it is. We have this symbol that is keeping quiet, that is watching over Africa, but the Africa itself and the Union itself with its chairperson is watching over France. Is this the African Union that you want? What is it that you want, Miriam? Back to you to tell us your opinion, what you want. What is the African Union you want?
Okay, well, yeah, even friends have conflict. I think conflict is inevitable wherever there is human interaction, and conflicts actually are healthy. I think ways in which we resolve them or the magnitude we let them get is what is a problem, and how we let them blow out of control, that is a problem. So wherever there is human interaction, absolutely, conflict is inevitable in friends, family. You will disagree because we don't all think alike, we don't all reason alike, we don't look towards a particular ending alike. So people disagree on ideology, on ideas, on everything else. So conflict is inevitable, and yes, that is expected, and it's not a bad thing actually. But I think the magnitude in which this conflict takes, that is a problem, and methods we choose to find a resolution is what really is a problem. So African Union and the AU and how it changed, and I think when they were changing from Organization of African Unity to AU, particularly this was meant for integration, because the Organization of African Unity was meant to fight colonialists and to champion for Africans being free and all that, and also just set the agenda for what our founding fathers had hoped will set this continent to a better footing and address the issues that plagued Africa then, Unfortunately, the same issues plague Africa today. So between us getting independence and today, nothing seems to have changed much. And that is because the successive heads of state and leadership that we've had in this continent did not share the same vision that our founding fathers had. And so we've had a lot of people who have been distracted, have taken on and embraced other things that have worked to defeat the purpose that was even set in that African Union. And so here we are with an institution that is meant to support and foster integration in this continent, sometimes being used as a tool to cause disintegration among the African countries. And of course, we know African Union has not really championed for Africa as it should. So it is lacking in that aspect. And I think that is quite obvious now. So perhaps as an African, what I'd love to do to see from the African Union is an institution that truly represents me and truly represents my interest. But I know that that is not really possible. That is not really possible, and we can sit here and beat African Union the whole day and tomorrow and talk, because they are very bad things and a lot of lack that we see from African Union. But as long as we cannot fund African Union, we can't fully own African Union. So I will sit here and talk about my dreams and aspirations and what I expect, but that is futile until you're able to own African Union and fund it and make it ours and put it there for it to for us to set the agenda for it and for us to demand some level of accountability. Then what can African Union do? We can't fund it. So African Union and the leadership in African Union will continue to be picked and influenced by the people who are funding that, and that is the EU and other countries that are funding the African Union. 75% of the funds that runs African Union comes from EU and other countries. So we fund a very small part of that. We can't fund. We can't take care of our own budget. So it's unfair to expect better from African Union when you can't even fund it. So those who are funding it, they'll have their agenda go. So if you are really serious about having an institution that fully represents us and our interest, then the first step to take as Africans is push for our countries to fully own this institution. And by funding it, that will be the first liberation movement, the first liberation step towards us having a very effective African Union. Otherwise, if that part, which is quite crucial, is really not taken care of, then African Union will continue running its agenda, the way it runs its agenda, based off of the funders. You know, you dance to the tune of those who are funding you, and then it will continue pushing for their agenda. And so ours will come secondary, as it has always been, and it will continue being that until we find African Union. So I think that is very, very key, and that is something that we have to look at. And so for me, as much as I'd like an African Union that represents me and my interest, until we are able to fund it, that will not be a reality. That will not be a reality. But I would wish to see an African Union that is truly captures the aspirations of its people. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And for obvious reasons.
Okay, thank you very much, Midian. One of the obvious reasons that you have given is they are not funded. They don't fund it themselves. They depend on the same person that they condemn to be funding them. So why can't we have people who can change? We can fund ourselves, Miriam. We can. If we had policies, you can change things. You see, things like a bottom-up in Kenya, parish model in Uganda. Those things change. You can invent something. If it is well organized, it can work. Why hasn't Africa done its own internal funding? We have a lot of resources. We have a lot of businessmen who bank the money in Citibank, in French banks, in Switzerland. But none of them can bank in their internal banks. If you created a bank, for example, in Addis Ababa and said 54 branches. Each country will have a branch. You can open sub-branches where people bank with Bank of African Union. If African Union Bank, imagine that name alone is a catchy name that everybody will say as an African and say, let me, instead of taking my money to Barclays, let me put it in this African Union. And then that money trades, and then you can pay for your elections. Every country in Africa now is asking for elections, except Zimbabwe. I don't think Zimbabwe is going to ask for any money for elections, because they will pay for their elections. People don't want to give it money, so they will pay for the elections. So we have a problem here. Karatizo, how are you? Are you just listening, or you want to make a comment, because I'm about to close? Karatizo? Okay, thank you very much. Miriam, you have made cardinal points, and let's just do a video, a takeaway for the people of Africa. From 1963 to 2002, African Union was called Organization of African Unity. One of its main aims and objectives is and was and still remains unity. The aim was to unite Africans. The objective was to achieve unity. Have we achieved the unity that we want on African continent? When you find some countries like Lesotho demanding a chunk of Africa, of South African land, Orange Free State, part of all those Western Cape states as being part of their nation, are we united? When you have countries still under war, Biafra is struggling for independence, for a referendum. Amazonia is struggling for its own independence to be recognized as a state. Western Sahara is still struggling. Are we really united? South Sudan has internal dynamics, still at war. Somalia is at war. Ethiopia recently, the war damaged every GDP they had. Democratic Republic of Congo, the guns are still roaring. Are we united? The main aim was unity. Organization of African Unity. We changed the name African Union. A union, what does it mean to you? Does a union mean a loose collection of states? States that are loose or united? Is there any unity in African Union? On economic front, we have nothing to boast about. We have institutions, commissions, Agriculture Commission, Mining Commission, Information Commission, Peace and Security Commission. But do they serve any purpose? Have they ever served a purpose for you? Do you have any idea of how, when peace will be coming in DRC Congo, in Central African Republic, in Libya, for example, where a state has been captured by external forces? Are we really united? Was this aim and objective, unity, has it been achieved? What Africa do you want? What African Union do you want? You want an African Union that can create its own money, its own resources, fund its own activities, other than an African Union that looks for active money from European partners, then we have nobody. We condemn them. They come. We have nothing. A man who gives you the food, you can't insult him. You'll always say yes, yes to the colonial master. Once you are being funded by the same countries against you formed an African Union. We formed because we said we have had enough of colonization. But are we still held as captives of colonial hangover? The answer is yes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.